Welcome to the Y on Earth Community Podcast. Today, we're visiting with Dr. Jandel Allen-Davis. Hi, Jandel.
Hi, Aaron. Hi.
I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today.
I appreciate it. As I said, I'm honored that you asked.
And we're going to be talking about this incredible time that we're going through as a nation and as a society. And get the perspective from you, Jandel, which I'm so grateful you're taking the time to share with us, with our audience, with the Y on Earth community. So to introduce Dr. Jandel Allen-Davis, MD, is the president and CEO of Craig Hospital in Denver, Colorado, a world-renowned rehabilitation hospital that exclusively specializes in the neurorehabilitation and research of patients with spinal cord and traumatic brain injuries. Dr. Allen-Davis was the Vice President of Government, External Relations, and Research for Kaiser Permanente, Colorado from 2009 to 2018. In that role, she led the organization's government relations and regulatory affairs, community relations and community benefit investment, clinical advertising, and marketing functions. Dr. Allen-Davis is board certified in obstetrics and gynecology and was in active practice for 25 years. A graduate of Dartmouth College and Dartmouth Medical School, Dr. Allen-Davis completed her residency at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in Philadelphia. She is an active participant in the community and currently serves on the boards of Denver Botanic Gardens, the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, National Jewish Health, and the Geisel Board of Advisors at the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth. She has been recognized as a 5280 magazine top doc in the Denver metropolitan area, in addition to other leadership awards, including Outstanding Woman in Healthcare by the Denver Business Journal. And Jandel, you've been on the Y on Earth Community Podcast before, a little over a year ago, I think, when we were talking about leadership and VUCA, and right now we're talking in a very different context. And I'd like to just open it right up and invite you to share with us what's going on from your perspective and how is it affecting you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Aaron, and thanks again for the opportunity to come hang with you for a little bit and talk about these incredibly VUCA times that in fact we're living in. In fact, I've used that phrase a couple times this week with our incident command team, because as you know, we've been at fighting a battle against an unseen enemy, that is the coronavirus. And I can say proudly, but still you just never tempt fate, that we've had no COVID cases at Craig. Wow. And you don't get that blessed, that lucky, without a lot of work. And so the whole idea of figuring out now, as the community is relaxing or reopening, how we keep our patients safe, given how vulnerable they are, has absolutely evoked the whole sense of VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And then to have what happened and is unfolded over this last, darn near 2 weeks, it'll be 2 weeks on Monday, with Mr. George Floyd, to have that on top of it with these absolutely righteous protests, violence notwithstanding, but to have this many people in the streets across the country, let alone the world, in the context of a pandemic, is it changes your plan. And for one thing for sure that we've had to do is remain very agile and flexible and measured. And I can remember at the beginning of the pandemic having my own sort of sense of, wait, what? Kind of that emotional thing. At the same time, trying to help take a team and keep a team safe, worry about my kids in New York City and family, other places, and at the same time having this big job to do in terms of being one of a member of several people but certainly as the president and CEO of our incident command, to figure out how we were going to keep people safe. And it's a crazy thing to have to sort of manage your own emotions, or sort of at least sort of touch base is probably better, because your own sort of emotional almost stages of grief. At the same time, you're trying to do this very technical, logistical thing that is not just a technical problem. It is very much an adaptive problem. And now we find ourselves still in the throes of that. And this, yet again, here we go, race issue in this country. Yeah. And the interesting thing is, maybe folks know, but you probably don't, is, first of all, I'm the first woman CEO at Craig, first position in a long time in terms, well, modern Craig for sure, first position, first African-American leader at Craig. And so there's me, and then you see every now and then faces in the sort of middle ranks. And then the only other place, I mean, the highest concentration of people of color at Craig are those who clean the floors and cook. Mm. And I knew that when I got there, but I also know, having lived on this earth a long time, and having observed lots of ways to enter into this conversation about race, that if I walk in on first day and say, "What's up?" I would have been instantly marginalized. You have to almost like earn your stripes, which you do anyway, just in general. But then certainly on an issue as emotionally charged, and unfortunately in this country, almost it's like a third rail issue, like we ain't talking about it, would have been hard. At the same time, harboring a lot of guilt about the fact that, we've got this big, rotting, stinking elephant sitting in the middle of the room, because every white person in the place knows, oh my gosh, we have a black person in the big office. We never really talked about it. I did a couple times try to broach the subject of the diversity through sort of wanting just to see numbers, and that's for another day. But it was interesting being told, oh, we're doing well in that space, and thinking, well, then my eyes would tell me something different. And again, needing to pace myself. Well, I have a strong belief that nothing happens by accident. Nothing, there are no coincidences. And there's the opportunity for synchronicity, serendipity in the face of even some of the ickiest stuff you're going through. And the idea of a pandemic, and in fact, last or when the protest started, I was calling it P squared, pandemic and protest. And by the end of the week, which I don't know why I didn't think of it before, I was calling it P cubed, because it's the pandemic, it's the protest, and the political environment that we're living in right now that has just turned this thing into a hot mess. And so and cubed is, or squared is appropriate, because the impacts are exponential. They are not additive. And so you put all that in the space, and because I don't believe that there's any such thing as accidents, this is another example. One of the phrases people are sick of hearing me say is, never let a good crisis go to waste. So this is the time to step into this space and pull back the veil, at least within our walls at Craig, let alone the conversations we have the opportunity to have outside of Craig, and just start talking about some things. So we've started some of that. So I'm doing all right. I cry a lot, tear up here and there, even today. Cry is like not wailing. I did cry myself to sleep that Tuesday night, because I hadn't seen that video until last Tuesday night. And I was just like the whole rest of the world, in shock, and so sad and so mad and so many emotions, and so scared on some level. So, certainly tears, and resolve is what I'd say. Resolved, resolute that we got to do some things.
Jandel, one of the main reasons I reached out to you a few days ago, there really are two. One is a friend reached out to me and said, what the heck is Why on Earth doing about what's going on right now? Mm-hmm. And it caused me to pause and think, what else, what can we be doing right now? And I think sharing this conversation is one of the minimal and small steps we can take and make. The other reason I reached out to you is that you shared a really, what struck me as a very emotional Facebook post several days ago. And I love, you post a lot. It's so fun to see when you're out walking and seeing the eagles and sharing what's going on with your gardens. It's lovely, right? And the one you shared a few days ago really hit me in the heart, and it was like, wow. And it caused me to just pause and think and feel a bit more about what's going on. And the emotional piece, I think sometimes it's hard when we're doing a podcast or having a recorded discussion, but the emotionality of this is so real and intense and raw. And I wonder, in a position of leadership, how do you, obviously leaders have to manage emotions in ordinary circumstances, but when it's appropriate to share and convey emotionality and depth of feeling, how do you do that in your position?
Well, I actually have a different point of view about whether leaders and when and what and how leaders show emotion. And it's actually grounded in the fact that, you know, when the CEO and president job at Craig came open, God didn't send okay, we need a new one, but boom, and now, okay, there's somebody there. You know, we're humans, for crying out loud, and we have our own walks, and we have our own sort of origin stories, and what I know, because as all of us, unfortunately, unless you're really one of the fortunate ones, has experienced, I've lived under some terrible leadership, and I've lived under some great leadership, and I've lived under some terrible times with great leaders and some good times with not so great leaders. So, and over many, you know, these number of decades, I've had two lists in my head: do that, don't do that, in terms of what leaders do. But out of all of it, what I know that every human on earth, and for sure what people who we as leaders serve want, is to know that they're showing up mattered, to know that they have the opportunity to contribute and realize their full potential. And most importantly, neither of those can happen until or unless leaders allow themselves to be seen and also see the people around them. And I didn't say look, I said see. That is so I think there's this, when we show that sort of emotion, and not falling on the floor and falling apart, because, you know, I would never do that, but even to show, really let people have the opportunity to see you authentically, especially in something like this, you know, around this issue of race, because it's so obvious she's Black and all of us are pretty much white. How's she doing? You know, how can I have this conversation? To not show the impact, the raw emotion, is a missed opportunity, a lost opportunity, but it shuts down. It does not invite conversation. And we will, as I sort of was talking to someone Thursday, and I said, we've got to start talking about this so we can stop talking about this, because we keep revisiting this conversation because it feels too emotionally heavy. So, you know, I don't worry about that. I think the only time, I think if I acted whatever buttoned up is, which is, I think, sort of that, you know, one archetype of what a good leader is. If I acted buttoned up now, I think it would scare people, because I'm just not that kind of leader anyway. And the last thing, given PQ, that anybody needs is a leader who shows fear. We're watching enough of that play out in some ways that you just go, wait, what? We're watching enough of that right now that is leaving everybody sort of in this sense of uncertainty. That's not my role. And so the other thing it does is it invites peeps in. It invites your people and those who love you and who you love to help you sort of figure out that way forward. So that's how I handle it, by being as authentic and as consistent and as, you know, as the same person who's at home is the same person who goes into work every day. The whole self goes to work every day.
There's a sense of integration there that's really inspiring. you shared with me, Jandel, some of the missives, the short writing pieces that you share with your team and your board, and you even gave me a sneak peek at some pieces that you'll be sharing in the coming days. And I was struck to read in there that you were in the fourth grade in 1968 when Dr. Martin Luther King was murdered, and you were in Washington D.C. and went to your grandmother's house and saw buildings burning as a result of the riots that erupted following that murder. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, given everything that's going on right now with the three Ps, set in the context of your perspective, your historical perspective of what's been going on in this nation and in this culture going back centuries, what are you seeing, and what are you anticipating going forward? Or do you think things are going to start changing, or is it more of the same?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I know what I want. I know what I wish for. I know that absolutely things need to change, but not in. What I think is we'll see some incremental change, if I'm really honest. But what I want is transformation. And there is this little part of me that wants to hope that, because the very thought that we have protests about the way Black people, and frankly, we need to way open the aperture, widen the aperture, and say brown people of all kinds on this earth, and disabled people, and women, and children, you name it, the inhumanity that power, and that's what it is. Let's just call it what it is, that those in power rain down on their people has got to stop. But that said, the fact that we're seeing protests around this world right now, all over the globe, in support of, and it's interesting that Black Lives Matter, but that it is really being experienced and being expressed as a uniquely American phenomenon. It's not to say that there aren't issues in England, and I heard a little bit about that with the protests that are going on there this morning, or in France, or in Germany, or places far, even in Africa, places far flung from here. But the support is really focused on the American journey, and I think that's where that third P is really, really hurting us. It's focused there because we do not. America is the leader of the free world. They're the ones. The whole world has been able to look for stability and hope and strength in the United States. And I'm going to tell you, you don't have that right now from a leadership perspective, pure and simple. And so I think that's the part that gives me a little bit of hope. So it's almost like, how do we leverage what the rest of the world is doing and how the rest of the world is watching what we're doing in an effort to really make some lasting change this time, and some sustained change, and actually in some and even walk into these conversations, walk into this work differently than we've done in the past. Because otherwise we'll get some incremental changes. Frankly, it makes me sad and frustrated, my policy hat on, that we feel the need to pass more laws around what's happening with police. There's no policing. There's no doubt that there's, because of 50 states and they all do their thing differently, that there might be some universal foundational ways. Not might be, there should be. But mostly, if leaders were just following their own policies, if we were looking at how bias plays out, if we believed, which we clearly don't, that this sort of brutality is real, we would have fixed it. So, in some cases you need more laws, not policy. You need laws. But the only reason you need laws is because they're not following their own damn policy. So I think we'll see some stuff there. That's not nearly enough. What I feel like has been awakened, and it's been interesting talking to some of my white colleagues over the last few days. There's a shock that, I'm just going to say it, y'all are manifesting that frankly shocks me.
Yeah.
Because this has been all around you. I mean, and interestingly, it started with the pandemic. The first shock was, oh my God, more Black people are dying from this disproportionate. It's like, and y'all seem surprised by it. When I saw the news, you'd see these newscasters. I go, but we've been talking about the social determinants of health and health equity and health disparities for 20 years. And so now you're woke. So it's not news to us. It's not news to us. And we clucked our tongue, and people have talked about it, but even just the contributing factors to why that is, essential. The only people who are still out here working are poor people. Somebody got to drive the buses. Somebody's got to clean the buildings, the few that are open. Somebody's got to cook food. Somebody's got to provide nourishment to all of us. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. And then to have this and say, and here's the thing. Please don't hear in this I'm not trying to engender guilt and shame, because I don't think they're useless emotions, and they actually inhibit innovation, creativity, and certainly create gulfs. But nice, wonderful people who I love and trust, they have their walks life. They have their frame of reference. They have their who they are, how they live. And to hear and see, I just never thought about this way, is it's just sad. It doesn't make me mad. It just goes to show, that one of the very much fundamental elements of human beings is our selfishness and our sort of egocentricity that can get in the way and make it hard for us to see what's going on right around us. And so that was a very long way of saying, I don't know. My belief is I'll die trying, which I hope is many, 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 many years from now, to continue to stay in this fight. The only other thing that keeps me, though, very, very optimistic is this generation that's coming along now. The young people, man. My kids see color and don't see color. And it's wonderful, right? Because you need to do both. White kids that they hang with see color and don't see color. What we've got to then do, because both of those things are only possible because we've set up a model for what civility, quote, looks like, and are hideously uncomfortable around poor Black folk and poor Latinas and Latinx, and hideously uncomfortable around people in wheelchairs and with brain injuries and that. And we got to be able to see beyond all that shit and just, pardon my English, and just see the person and see the soul that's within. And that's a good thing. But part of what is that informs that soul and informs that heart is, in fact, the disability, is the skin color, is the gender, is the ethnicity. And we need to celebrate and embrace it all, because that's America.
Yeah. I'm struck thinking about how so much of what's taught under the banner of history in a lot of our schools really, whitewashes, to say the very least, so much of the history of this country and this culture. And I'm wondering, what would you advise or hope or exhort or implore us white folks to do, to not do, to do more of, to better understand the reality that is around us?
So, I remember last Sunday, and it's coming up. It's not in the thing that I sent you the other day, but it's in one of those 7 pages. After I wrote that post on Facebook, it's had 270 some, I don't know, like, hugs, whatever, thumbs up. But that being 166 comments that I've, sort of either had some conversation with. It's had 31 shares, and it's not viral, but that's striking to me. And what it said to me is that people really need to talk about this stuff. But one of the things that was the one that I still am uncomfortable with, and I got an email from a dear friend today who was, I'm sorry, I'm not doing enough. And the shame was just oozing out the phone because I'm reading this email. And I thought, this is not helpful. And this woman is so good. She is goodness personified. And I've been trying to figure out why does that bother me? And it bothers me for an interesting reason. It bothers me because, and last Sunday it hit me. I had the epiphany. It further sort of solidifies separateness. You know, you think about when somebody dies, I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
Right? So you think about this whole thing, I'm so sorry. It's like, no, we all need to be sorry because this is a shared shame. This is a shared stain. And I'm sorry, and then saying to me, well, what should I do, assumes that I am in a powerful enough position to really make the kind of substantive change that needs to happen. You know, I think that this is going to sound weird, but I think that there are conversations that Black folk need to have in their rooms, and Hispanic in their rooms, and there's conversations that white folks need to have about this discussion in their room alone. So I think there are some discussions, and really what that means is that there's some looks in the mirror we have to do. Don't think for a second that I haven't harbored some level of guilt every day. Not every day, that's dramatic. But when I come into Craig and I think about the fact that when are you going to get about really broaching the subject of why there are no people of color in leadership in this place, and why there are no, there's one, I think, African-American OT. He's OT, PT. He's PT.
And tell us what PT
I'm sorry,
is.
physical therapist.
Okay.
Physical therapist.
Yeah.
And the other's occupational therapist. And when are you going to get about this? You can't. This is weird. This is you are not doing something you know that needs to be addressed. And why aren't you? And it's because, interestingly, we need you to invite the conversation. We need you to say, let's fix this. How would we go about this? And it's because what I think everybody's missed is we're just as uncomfortable having this conversation as you are. You know, when you stop to think about it, it mostly happens in the context of loud, screaming Black Lives Matter, right? I mean, that's when people get woke. That's when people see it. And then what happens at work is we play nice, and we play nice because we are nice. We play nice because we do like each other. I love the people I work with. I love going to Craig every day. And now it's time. So if you ask me what can we do, even saying what can we do, I mean, it sort of implies what's your contribution to this, being that's your problem over here, as opposed to saying this is all of our problem. And change is going to have to happen at a policy level. It's going to have to happen at a political level, which are different. It's going to happen at an organizational level, a community level, within homes level. And so then you look at that and you go, my head just exploded. I don't even know where to begin. But I think I do know where to begin. And we begin by talking. There's a custom, old African custom called Mbizo, and it means talking things out. And the elders in villages, who are all men, by the way, just have to be African men, when there was a problem or a community issue that needed to be solved, they'd sit under a tree and they would talk things out. And you would talk and you would talk and you would talk and you revisit and you'd come back to it and you come back to it. And what that tells me is that they sat with the tension, because it's in the tension that the real goodness is. Don't be repulsed by it. Don't be repelled by it. And don't rush to sort of solve to it and try to find a technical fix for something that's actually adaptive. And that's what we need to do. You know, one of the interesting stories about that, as I hear myself say that, is what two women, 2 Ethiopian women did in Africa to take acceptance of female genital mutilation from 98% in 1998 or 1999 down to I think 8% by 2008 or something. And it was exactly this technique. It was talking things out and making the space, making it safe enough where people felt safe enough to say, I don't like it either. And these were women who were actually doing the procedure on these young girls. And that's what we have to do on this. So I think it actually starts with talking. It doesn't actually start with compliance. You know, if you think about this on one side, on a spectrum, there's commitment, there's engaging the heart. And then on the other side, there's compliance. And what we always want to do is go over here and just work on the compliance side. Well, let's make sure, let's check some boxes, and which I will not do in terms of getting enough Black people or Hispanic people or whatever. And we're going to take our time and do this the right way so that it doesn't fall off. And we will set up measurement, and that which is measured is managed. We'll get there. But we're going to start with talking, because people want to talk, and people do want to express sorrow, and it's nothing wrong with expressing sorrow. Just don't do it in a sense of don't be sorry for me. Be sorry with me. Ooh, yeah, be sorry with me, because we're all in this muck. Every single one of us. Just some of us are in deeper muck than others.
That's a really wonderful phrase. I'm just writing this down really fast.
Be sorry with me. I should be writing it down too. Don't be sorry for me. Be sorry with me.
I'll send you my notes.
Yeah, because sorry for me implies pity. And
Yeah.
Pity is another one that doesn't get us anywhere. We need to channel empathy, because y'all are getting screwed by not facing and dealing with this as much as we are. It really is whether you want to call it an all boats rise with the tide, or we're all, every system is perfectly designed to achieve what it achieves. You're part of that system. We're part of that system. So, yeah.
Yes, very much. It's so interesting. I'm looking back at the missive you wrote, where in an introductory paragraph you mentioned shirking, responsibility, commitment, and accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing in this call to talking it out into channeling empathy is for each of us to perhaps pause and take a look at what we might be shirking.
Mm. Yeah, the other part of this pause, I love that you said pause, because there's another phrase, go slow to go fast. We immediately go fast. They're already talking about passing federal legislation around policing, for example. There'll be someone who will bring up, we've got to get education. And there'll be small nonprofits who dollars will flow into to do God knows what. And we need to slow our roll and really, as I think I said in that same piece, I think it's in that one, that, we go back to, in my case, it was like the last Tuesday, making masks with the television behind me, watching sort of in and out. But that metaphor of my back's turned to the ugliness. And that's what we do. We cluck our tongues, we have our protests, then we go back to work. We have, I was thinking about the women's marches on a Saturday, and then Monday you go back to the same oppressive or maybe very much enlightened workplaces you were in before. So if we want real substantive change, what we have to do is slow our roll long enough to talk, and to really talk about the issue, which is racism and bigotry and hatred and bias, which are all part of the human condition. But we're presumably higher order beings. Some days I wonder, and are more evolved. So how do we use this thing called the cerebral cortex, which is still a pretty new part of the brain, but at least it gives us the thinking part, we think, relative to other animals. And the one thing it for sure gives us is choice. And we can choose to run away from this, in which case, back to your question you asked me earlier, will anything change? The answer is no. We can choose to kind of look at it, in which case we'll get incrementalism, or we can slow down long enough to really be able to really see each other and be seen by each other, and have honest, hard conversations where we would walk away some days crying so hard snot's flying out of our nose, but come back the next day and keep talking. Because these are conversations and these are relationships and connections that are based on love and trust that we're having those with, right? That's why protests they're the wake-up call. But then the real conversations are one at a time, or small circles, that sort of thing, with people you love and trust who don't look like you, and also people you love and trust who do look like you, because there's some hard conversations we need to have on both sides of these fences about how we're showing up for each other or not.
Yeah. It's striking me right now. A friend of mine, a female professional therapist, is doing work to launch small discussion circles, pods around trauma, different forms of trauma that people experience as a way to heal. So I'm wondering if part of what might be showing up for us, for our culture, is an emergence of these conversation circles. In addition to what we might do in our homes, in our neighborhoods, etc., maybe there's something emerging that actually helps us heal these centuries-long issues that surround us. I don't know.
Yeah. As you say it, I'm going back to my sort of the 70s when I was, a teenager in the 70s, and thinking about what they called rap sessions, or that they were all the power of small circles. And so there is something there, and I'm also, it's not a well thought out sort of thing that's emerging here coming up, but thinking about why is it that my kids don't see color, in fact, as much? Why is it that white kids walk around and have such access to the Black culture in a way? I mean, it's so funny, people play your music from my time. I go, I never heard that song. And what they fail to realize is that white music was very separate from Black music, right? It's like never the twain. And now it's just all out there and it's music. Yeah. And even art was very separate. And now it's just out there and it's music that's accessible. The technology has helped, I think, a lot, some of those things. But I think there is incredible power in small circles. And in fact, I'm going to forget his name, but he wrote a book called Community. As I think about it, maybe it'll come back. But he talks about the power of the small circle. And structurally, which is not like a how to do it, but the real power in the small circles is that we're all having the same conversations at the same time, right? You don't, it's not, let's just, and having some structure to them. So, I remember when I first read that, I thought about how cool would it be, and I was thinking about it in an organization, not in sort of at a community level. Yeah. If all of us at 8:00 on a da-da-da night were going to talk about X in terms of this, and be taking ourselves through and have some way then through these technologies or blogs or I don't know, these sort of things, to share what's coming out of these and begin to build on it. Mm-hmm. What humans lack the ability to do, though, is to stay in any conversation too long, right? Or to stick to anything too long. But, it'd be, the only way you can make it a universal would be to, I don't know, wave really a magic wand. But it's not to say that we can't start small and do that in some places. And start where you start. You could, you don't want to be building it. I want them to be diverse groups, obviously, and not just diverse in terms of color, but diverse in terms of socioeconomics, because the other thing that we need to recognize that's going on out there right now is that this is a class war as much as it is a race war. Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much to unpack. There's so much to unpack. Even with this protest, one thing that I don't know that I haven't heard a thing about, and I want to go back and take a look again. But I do believe the young man who called in the whatever to the police department is of Asian descent. And the relationship and the history and the tension that exists in African American communities where Asians have businesses is ugly, and we're not talking about that. So there's that one to talk about. I mean, this thing has so many layers and is so nuanced. At the same time, it's right there for all of us to see. And I do remember, because I went back to say, wait a minute, counterfeit? Was it real? Forgery? What's going on? And I saw a picture of him, as I recall, or maybe even some video, I forget now. I've seen too much this week. And I said, he's Asian American. Oh, here we go. The relationship is so tense. And there's so much disrespect there that needs to be unpacked too. Anyway. You got me talking now.
Well, yeah, no, it's that shows up in hip hop songs. I mean, it's there, and
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's speaking of this cultural access to each other's art and music. My son, I listen to a lot of hip hop when I'm hanging out with my son, and it's interesting because it has. I used to have a different view. I think it just didn't quite appeal to me, although I really love bass. I just enjoy it. But lately I've been listening to it with an eye to trying to understand a little bit more cultural experience that isn't the experience I've had in my upbringing, in my adulthood. And I have to give, some kudos to my son who through his basketball, has been able to do a lot more interacting across all different parts of town. And kudos to him for being so open. And like when he's on the court, right, it's not at all about how much money your parents have or what color the skin is. It's whether you're good at passing and shooting and defense and all that. So yeah, that Asian African American tension definitely shows up in some of
I
it.
did not know that. Wow. Now I'm going to I'll talk to my kids and say, turn me on to some of that, because it would be good to hear how it comes in, how it's even introduced, because we do need to talk about that. And it once again sort of points to the class war and the intra-cultural and the intercultural wars that we have that we don't speak about.
Yeah.
Enough about, if at all.
Jandel, let me just remind our audience that this is the Why on Earth Community Podcast, and I'm your host, Aaron Perry. Today we're visiting with Dr. Jandel Allen-Davis, talking about so much that surrounds us in our culture that really needs healing. And I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsors who make this podcast series possible, including today's episode. And that includes Earth Coast Productions, the Lidge Family Foundation, Purium, Earthwater Press, and Waylay Waters, as well as a number of individuals who have joined our monthly giving program. And if you haven't yet joined and you'd like to, you can go to whyonearth.org to find out about that, as well as the rest of the community mobilization that we're doing for climate action, soil regeneration, community resilience, and culture of kindness. And of course, today's discussion relates in a really big way to the culture of kindness and the community resilience. And Jandel, I'm so grateful that we have this opportunity to visit with you, given everything that's going on, and also given how busy you are and how full your plate is with responsibilities, professional and otherwise. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion with you.
Well, I get as much from it as I give, if not more. So it's all good. It really is. Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering, before we wrap up and close, is there anything else that you'd like to share that we haven't had a chance to get to?
I think we've covered a lot of territory. I think the thing I humbly implore all of us to do is to recognize that we are, I was thinking about this and talking to our director of psychology yesterday. So this is an interesting story, who asked, after having a meeting, why isn't Craig putting something out there about this? We've said nothing. And I see so-and-so in this company and this one says, well, as it turns out, I'd been asked earlier in the week, and I saw the email, and I've just been so busy I didn't get a chance to get back to our communications team to tell them, no, we're not doing that. So I was asked at the beginning of the COVID thing, oh, everybody's putting some out. Should we put some out? And no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. In the early, and then Toby and I got in this conversation. I said, here's one of the interesting ways you can be helpful to us, is that this is trauma. Let's just call it that. In some ways, what we're walking through and enduring, a freaking pandemic, and then global, forget the consequence, but we all watched a man get killed. We watched, and it wasn't like a gunshot, which would have been traumatic enough, but to watch somebody's life slowly ebb from them over 8 minutes and 46 seconds or something like that. This is a trauma that we're all facing. And I said, it might be helpful just in terms of helping your team, but also being helpful to us and sort of being like an interesting kind of truth teller, observer. Because what stage of trauma are we in? What stage of grief are we in? And I say all that, Aaron, because we're in the early stages of this. In fact, I was supposedly off yesterday. I didn't do a very good job at being off. And this conversation was troubling to me because, I did have this moment as the leader where I went, am I not doing something I'm supposed to be doing? I said, no, your gut's good. You are not. We're not going to do that. Or this sense of, well, nobody has said anything. And he said, I knew stuff was going on, and I knew we had talked about it on one of our big Zoom leadership calls. And I said, and I had planned to talk about it in the all-staff meeting on Wednesday, but the guy who we brought in to talk about the infectious disease coronavirus, I didn't know he was going to take the whole hour, so there was no time to really speak to our teams. So then I said, I want to get this first installment or segment out, so I got it out yesterday. But I said to him, we're in the early stages of trauma, and here's how I'd wrap up with that by way of context. What everybody wants right now is for the pain to be relieved. That's what they want. We all want, we want the pandemic to go away. We want our lives back. We want to be able to hug. We want to be able to touch. We want to take these masks off. We need to literally and figuratively do that. And right now, people just want the pain to stop. They want the image of watching Mr. George Floyd killed to be sort of somehow or other cut out of our psyches. What I beg and humbly implore all of us to do is feel every bit of this pain. Do that thing that, I can't think of his name, The Power of Now. That author who, it goes back, The Power of Now, which is all about taking a moment and observing your thoughts. I see you try to figure out, remember what his name is.
I'm blanking on it. I was just talking about it too.
Or you have the power now. And is this, we must feel every bit of this grief and trauma. Don't anesthetize. Don't try to, as I said, don't try to cover it up under strong stoicism. Don't actually stop at why am I angry? I really do view anger as a secondary emotion whose primary emotion almost always is fear. Explore that fear in yourself. And let yourself feel this grief. Let yourself cycle through, maybe several times a day, but certainly several times a week, the stages that have been talked about. And by the way, Kubler-Ross's 5 Stages of Grief, Kessler was the other person who wrote that book, has added a 6th with the family's permission, and it's called meaning. And that last, so you go through, the anger, the bargaining, the denial, I can't remember the other 2 right now, but I know the final one is sort of this resolution or acceptance. But beyond acceptance is meaning. Don't rush to meaning. Don't rush through this. Feel this. Please feel this. I beg you not to stuff it, because if you stuff it and try to like rush through this, that's, I think you called it, did you call it window dressing? I forgot what word you used earlier on some of the stuff we did. I call it papering over. We're just papering over a thing. And what we need to do is actually, I'm going to be a gross doctor for a minute. This is an abscess. And it's a deep one. And this thing needs an incision and draining. And I'm going to tell you something, having had to do INDs on incisions and drainages on women over the years, either incisions that got infected or some of the things that happen on some of our other body parts. There is nothing comfortable about an IND. And until you do it, you're not going to make your patient better. So we need to feel this. We need to feel every bit of this and be okay in the tension, be okay in the discomfort, be okay in the pain, and don't do it alone. And don't do it alone. These are the times where it's tempting to kind of separate, which is why it's beautiful that you called and why I said I'd humbly accept, because I need this as much as you do. We need this as much as you all need this. Stay close, stay connected, and allow yourself the gift, the tender mercy of feeling every bit of the host of emotions that will wash over you in these coming weeks and days. And that's why, in my mind, and so we begin is, and hopefully, and it isn't again, and so we begin again. But let's begin differently this time. That's what I'd say.
Yeah.
Tears, through tears.
Yeah. Thank you, Jandel.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I so appreciate you and your
back at you, as you know.
wisdom.
Yeah. Let them flow, y'all.
Yeah.
Windshield tears, sewing room tears. I'm making so many masks these days. Just let them flow. We need to let them flow through your smiles. Let them flow through your frowns. And just believe in your own goodness, because people like that person we saw are so broken. And that's not the state of most humans on this earth. And so believe in your own goodness. Don't get yourself too admired in shame, so that we can get about it.
Beautiful. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. And you're welcome. Yes.
Well, we'll share this discussion very soon, and with the audience. And again, just appreciate all that you've shared with us today, Jandel. Really do.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be vulnerable and share a little bit. And I can't wait till we can get back to the days of whole faces, no masks, and lots of good hugs.
Yeah,
but not yet. Not yet, says Dr. Allen-Davis. You can't do it yet. So take good care of you. Take good care of you.
Thank you. And likewise.
Okay, love you.
Love you. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Y on Earth Community Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series is hosted by Aaron William Perry, author, thought leader, and executive consultant. The podcast and video recordings are made possible by the generous support of people like you. To sign up as a daily, weekly, or monthly supporter, please visit yonearth.org/support. Support packages start at just $1 per month. The podcast series is also sponsored by several corporate and organization sponsors. You can get discounts on their products and services using the code YONEARTH, all one word with a Y. These sponsors are listed on the yonearth.org/support page. If you found this particular podcast episode especially insightful, informative, or inspiring, please pass it on and share it with a friend whom you think will also enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And thank you for being a part of the Y on Earth community.